I had an onboarding chat with one of our new members, getting to know them before they come into the community. And they just went straight in with some really sage, but really tough, big questions. And sitting on the sofa with a cup of tea with this real feeling of like, kind of just give me strength. Like, I'm on this, I'm working on this, I'm thinking about this stuff. And I'm so, so, so grateful for that feedback. But let's just think about the way we build relationships, and maybe there's a moment to acknowledge that someone's doing a lot of work behind the scenes. And I think that's kind of, that's what we were just catching up on. Like, it's just a recognition of how much you don't know, and that what you see publicly is really, really the tip of that iceberg. And I think just to remain super mindful that there's like a suite of hard graph that sits underneath that.
So was the feedback a little bit savage?
It wasn't savage, it was big. It wasn't like, hey, have you thought about changing this color? It was like, your business model, maybe it's not right. And it's like, yeah, maybe it's not right, but maybe today is not the day for this to come as like news to me. And maybe there's a recognition that like, I'm probably aware that there are other models, and I've probably thought about it quite a lot.
Yeah.
For kind of obvious reasons.
Unsolicited feedback can be quite fun, I think. As in, not to give, I think it's awful.
Just like run around the world, just like smashing out unsolicited feedback. That is fun.
I found sometimes when people give it to me, it's like, oh, wow, that's really interesting, thanks. Other times it's like, similar to what you said, there is a plan here. We've thought about this. We've been there. I think the worst, and it's definitely a pet peeve of mine, is when I start talking, somebody asks me about the business, I start talking to them, here's what we're doing at WOW, and so on. And then they jump in with a solution. And sometimes it's always well-intended, but it's like, you've got to give the space to hear the context before you jump in with the solution, because it can be painful. And then I'm stuck in two minds. It's like, one, I can let this person continue for the sake of being polite and letting them continue. Or two, I can jump in and just be like, hey, no, I've thought about this, but it's never fun.
That line where you jump in and say, hey, actually, I've thought about it, sounds really defensive and sounds like you've got your back up. And so I think actually it's a bit of a catch-22 in that situation. All you have to do is listen to the feedback and say thank you. Feedback's always a gift, always say thank you, and then you can decide like whether to return it or not.
Yeah.
But I think, like, I guess in giving feedback, it's the question of, are you interested in some feedback? Like, ask for permission before you give it, and then frame things as, have you thought about this territory, which allows someone the opportunity to go, yeah, funny enough, I've thought about that loads. And then you have a space where there's context.
Exactly.
But I think feedback without permission is a dangerous game.
Yeah. Is that creating the space? I think that's it.
Yeah, I think those questions create the space.
Yeah, not necessarily giving it there and then, but saying, hey, as you said, would you like to have some feedback? And then actually creating the space, creating a different call, going somewhere else. If you're sitting in one room, go to the other room. It just changes the dynamic.
And then how would you like to receive the feedback? Do you want it on a call? Do you want it as a voice note? Do you want it as an email? Like, I don't necessarily want it right now in my WhatsApp. Like, just a bit of sensitivity, depending on the context and trying to understand what else might be going on for someone.
So I would imagine there are some people listening to this conversation thinking, geez, wow, we really need to be so sensitive to the people we work with and how we give them feedback. Because I've heard that from the kind of old school business people.
Yeah.
But I would challenge that in saying, like, people change, people's expectations of work change. And we're now in a position where people don't commit to being a certain worker for their entire life. They move around a lot. So as an employer or as a manager, so much of your job is about empowering people, inspiring people, and, making sure that they maybe not like you, but respect you enough. And I think giving feedback in this way helps with that. Yeah,
well, I'd say go away, read Radical Candor. Anyone that starts in the Copy Club team gets sent it on day one. We have a policy around it. It's like fundamental to the way we operate as a business. And one of the key ideas in the book, for anyone that hasn't read it, is the importance of being good at receiving feedback, and then the importance of giving good feedback. And those two pillars are like essential to a culture in which feedback is like important. If you don't give it well and then you don't receive it well, then you're not going to foster the right environment.
Can you think of a time when you've received really bad feedback and then also really good feedback?
I receive really good feedback all the time from my head of people specifically, who I've had very like some constructive conversations around like how we both like to receive feedback. So I know that she prefers feedback in writing so that she can have time to reflect on it. She knows I prefer feedback in like short Slack messages or in a voice note because that allows me to move fast, but it's always with permission. So I did a talk yesterday. She sent me a Slack message saying, would you like some feedback on that? I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm in a really high energy mood. Go for it. 2 super quick points, like a green tick emoji from me. And I've really learnt. And that's like no love lost. There's no emotion in that. Yeah. It's just really, really straightforward. And I think that example it like demonstrates how it goes well. I can think of a time recently where I've given really bad feedback.
What was it?
Where I, and Hope won't mind me saying this because she pulled me up on it. Hope, who was the first employee of the Copy Club, asked what I would call a really bad question in the Copy Club Slack group, where she sort of said to a sub-community within our gang, like, hey, how can we do this better? And it was just like a really open-ended, abstract question. I probably misquoted her there, but it was not a question that anyone was going to answer. And so my approach was to write on LinkedIn that I thought it was a bad question, which is clearly not the way that you say to someone, hey, would you like this? Like, is there space for feedback? And I'd given that feedback to her privately, but I'd assumed that she was like up for that being public fodder, which is like a complete assumption. So I don't need to say that, but don't do that. Don't be a dick. Yeah.
It's a good example. I remember giving, terrible. It makes me cringe feedback, right? So early on in the days of WoW, my view of business was watching Harvey Specter in Suits.
Yeah.
That's how you do things, right? You say the big moment at the end, you make the joke or the pun, and then you walk out the room.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. And so that's what I did. And thank God people on my team who are still in the team today were just like, nah, that's not it.
It's not going to work.
So there was one time in particular, it's painful to talk about, but basically, it was a client presentation. And at the end of it, once the client was gone, I kind of just stood there and I was like, I'm so disappointed. And then I was like, this is, I can't believe that's just happened. How did we allow that to happen? And it was just so accusatory and just unkind and kind of not nice, and almost like movie moment where it's, the big words are said and then one person walks out of the room. It was just so backwards.
Yeah.
Thank God they gave me feedback. And then at a similar time, another person gave me feedback. And now it's like, I get it. So through learning.
How would you have handled that now?
I'd have said, cool, right, how do we feel about that? How did it all go? And they'd have said, yeah, it was all right. And I say, right, what, why is it that the call didn't run as smoothly as we wanted? Okay. And then, because if you know something's gone wrong, you don't need to be told. And I think that's a really key part of it. But so they gave me that feedback. It was great. I improved. And I definitely go towards the soft side of things now. But I just think to some of the clients we've had and some of the conversations I've had with them back when I was managing their campaigns, and I would always walk away feeling happy and positive, even when the topic that we just discussed was not good. It was fundamentally not good. Let's say a campaign wasn't going well. Let's say a client wasn't happy. I left feeling good and excited. It just got to a point where I was like, why can't I do more of that? Because that really works. And that was a tough conversation we had, but I now feel excited about working with this person. And there's a level of like zen and a level of calmness that you can give to somebody with feedback. And it's difficult because you've got to take some of the emotion out of it. But I see that a lot from our clients. And these are the people who have built big businesses, assembled amazing teams and kept those teams.
Yeah.
So I always try to do more of that.